lawyers for Brian Kober, that suspect in the brutal Idaho college murders, are pushing to move his trial, saying that the jury pool is biased.
Koberger is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students at an off-campus house in 2022, but his attorneys say he can't possibly get a fair trial in the county where the murders happened because of their notoriety. For more, let's bring in Shauna Lloyd, ABC's legal contributor and partner at the Cochran firm. So, Shauna, this often comes up in high-profile cases. This is such a shocking crime. That community, so tight-knit, just devastated by it. Do his lawyers have an argument here?
That's where lawyers for Brian Kober, that suspect in the brutal Idaho college murders, are pushing to move his trial, saying that the jury pool is biased.
Koberger is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students at an off-campus house in 2022, but his attorneys say he can't possibly get a fair trial in the county where the murders happened because of their notoriety. For more, let's bring in Shauna Lloyd, ABC's legal contributor and partner at the Cochran firm. So, Shauna, this often comes up in high-profile cases. This is such a shocking crime. That community, so tight-knit, just devastated by it. Do his lawyers have an argument here?
Absolutely, Terry. There's always an argument for a change of venue if you feel like the client is going to be prejudiced because of the notoriety of this particular case. And as we know, this was everywhere. It was in every newspaper. People were hanging on the edges of their seat to find out and figure out who did this. So he does have an argument. This defense does have an argument. But we have to remember, most cases are not transferred because there's such a large jury pool that could be potentially able to be sat in this particular case. So they are going to have to meet that burden of proof before it'll be transferred.
So what are you watching for next in this trial?
Well, Carrie, I'm curious to see how the judge is going to take the survey that was sent out. There was a survey sent out by the defense just trying to get a gauge for what people knew about the trial. How does she see that? Does she see that as something that did violate the gag order? And whether or not she feels that there's so much pervasive news about this story that she feels a change of venue is warranted.
Welcome back to my Mental Health and Crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is the case of the Idaho quadruple murders, and this is for entertainment purpose only. Ann Taylor and the defense team want this case to be moved to another venue, another court venue, because they feel and believe that they will get a biased jury. I do actually agree with Ann Taylor. Brian Christopher Koberger is being charged for 4 murders and 1 burglary. Since this is a capital case, he should be entitled to get the correct justice that is required, a fair justice, so that we can find out who did this awful quadruple murders, and that so that the correct justice could be served. I personally do not believe that Brian Koberger is going to get a fair trial in Idaho, Moscow. The reason I say that is because we can already see that the DNA evidence, IgG evidence, most of them haven't been turned in. For the last year and a half, Ann Taylor has been asking for the 3 unidentified male DNAs and other DNAs so that she could understand and figure out how they're accusing Brian Christopher Koberger of doing these horrific quadruple murders by himself. I personally believe that Brian Christopher Koberger could be involved, but the others who participated in this horrific quadruples. The reason I say that is we can clearly see in the grub truck video or live stream at Banfield, we do see a lot of things that points out to the fact that there were more people involved. And after hearing that Ann Taylor is going to, or has requested for 400 witnesses to be brought to court, that makes me believe that there are more people who are aware of these horrific crimes when they were happening. I personally believe all the people who live in Taylor Apartments, Linda Lane, and Kings Road would have heard something. I don't believe these 4 students were unalived in their sleep.
Man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students at an off-campus house in 2022 says he can't get a fair trial in the county where the murders happened. Victor Oquendo has that story for us. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning, Robin. Brian Kohberger's lawyer arguing that the jury pool, which would... Good morning, Robin. Brian Kohberger's lawyer arguing that the jury pool, which would be made up of people who live in the area, is biased because of all of the attention this case has gotten. Court documents show that attorneys for the man accused of the murders hired an outside consultant to take a community attitude survey to look at media and social media coverage of the case to assess case recognition, familiarity, and bias, hoping to convince the court to move the trial to a different county. Well, after this was brought to the attention of the court by prosecutors who asked the judge to ban this sort of outreach, the judge overseeing the case has ordered that for now, neither side can contact prospective jurors. Brian Kohberger has been charged with first-degree murders of Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, Zana Kernodle, and Madison Mogan. They were found dead in their home near the school a year and a half ago. He was arrested a month later after fleeing to Pennsylvania and has been behind bars since. If convicted, he faces the death penalty.
This seems like where the staircase or the ladder was at. Could it be possible that they climbed up with the ladder? This is the basement of 1122 Kings Road. I wonder if somebody could have had access to come inside the property from the basement. This clip is from NBC News, and this was when Brian Christopher Kohberger got arrested.
On raid in late December, law enforcement arresting Brian Kohberger at his parents' Pennsylvania home, taking the suspect into custody after a 6-week manhunt. Brian! Now in a newly unsealed search warrant, we're learning what else authorities took from his family home that morning. Among the items, a flashlight and medical gloves, an assortment of clothing, including a black sweatshirt and black and white Nikes, and a cheek swab, presumably for the suspect's DNA. According to 2 sources familiar with the investigation, NBC News learned investigators used forensic genealogy to zero in on Kohberger, possibly using DNA recovered from a knife sheath found near the body of one of the victims. In a previous search of Kohberger's apartment in Washington State, investigators also gathered possible hair strands, chemical-resistant gloves, items that had red and brown stains, and a computer tower. In December, Kohberger had driven home with his father to Pennsylvania from Washington State University, where he was pursuing his PhD in criminal justice. On that trip, the pair were pulled over twice in Indiana weeks before the arrest.
How y'all doing today?
They were driving a white Hyundai Elantra, the same type of car police say was captured on surveillance video near the scene of the murders. Kohberger's school less than 10 miles from the University of Idaho, and the off-campus home where 4 students, Zana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Maddie Mogan, were found stabbed to death on November 13th. The surviving roommate telling authorities she saw a figure dressed in black in the home that night. Now Kohberger is awaiting trial on 4 counts of first-degree murder. He has not formally entered a plea, but has said through a former attorney that he believes he will be exonerated. Meanwhile, the community of Moscow, Idaho, is trying to move forward.
I feel better, sort of, knowing that they have the suspect in custody, that there's a chance that this might all be behind us.
Roommate telling authorities she saw a figure dressed in black in the home that night. Now Kohberger is awaiting trial on 4 counts of first-degree murder. He has not formally entered a plea, but has said through a former attorney that he believes he will be exonerated. Meanwhile, the community of Moscow, Idaho is trying to move forward.
I feel better, sort of, knowing that they have the suspect in custody, that there's a chance that this might all be behind us soon enough.
The university announcing the house where the murders happened will be demolished, calling it a healing step and a way to stop efforts to further sensationalize the crime scene.
Now, authorities still haven't publicly released a motive for the attack, but alleged Kohlberger stalked the victim's house at least a dozen times before the killings and say he went back to the crime scene hours after the murders.
Some of the items that were seized at Kohlberger's family's house, anything jump out to you on that list?
Yes, what's compelling and what people have focused on is the 9 items that were actually seized, but that only tells half of the story. What's also interesting is the long list, I think it's on page 6, of items that law enforcement were looking for, and that's a much broader list. So, in a sense, the fact that those 9 items don't include electronic devices, which were on the search warrant, other items, there were a limited number of clothing items taken from the residence. So there is something telling in the fact that there were only 9 items, clothing, a flashlight, no electronic devices. A lot of the things they were looking for in the search warrant were not recovered. So that is very interesting to me, and maybe not that surprising, because you might not expect a lot of evidence at his parents' home.
Still this morning, one of the biggest outstanding questions in this case seems to be motive. What do you make of that, or what are we hearing?
Motive is not an element of a crime. Prosecutors love to inject motive because it can be evidence of somebody's intent. But you don't need a lot of motive for intent evidence here, because it's obvious that these killings were done intentionally. So while motive is a helpful thing for prosecutors, it's not essential. If they're in closing argument on trial this case, they can basically say, the prosecutors, look, we don't know why he did it. He's maybe a serial killer. Who knows? Motive is not important. What's important is the evidence before you, and the evidence shows that Mr. Kohlberger was here. He was the only one that could have done it. Something like that. How did I do, Craig?
Yeah, great. Let's see, end of June, I believe, for this preliminary hearing.
Yes.
Are you surprised at all that there's been such a chasm or such a gap between his arrest and this initial preliminary hearing?
Yes and no. Under Idaho procedure, and it's similar procedure in many states, the preliminary hearing has to happen within 14 days unless the parties agree otherwise. And generally speaking, in high-profile cases, you take the rules of procedure, you ball them up, and you throw them out the window. There seem to be different rules for high-profile cases. Yes, many months out is a long time for a preliminary hearing, but if both parties want it, if both parties want the time, then it is permitted under Idaho rules.
And to be clear, he still has yet to enter a plea either.
Very strange, but not considering how far out the preliminary hearing is. Like many states, Idaho bifurcates. They have a lower court, kind of a triage court, that handles this with the magistrate. It's not even to the final court it will be in, which is district court in Idaho. So that's why he hasn't yet entered a plea. It will come at or around the time of the preliminary hearing.
Thank you, David.
We're aware that Brian Christopher Kohlberger entered a plea of not guilty. He said he is waiting to be exonerated in this case. Early in the investigation, this photo was circulating. Someone posted it to Snapchat as a geosnap, the night/morning of the murders. It pinged near the victim's residence around 3:30 a.m. I'm sure the police are aware of who posted it, etc. Also worth mentioning, it was cold. Maybe people were wearing ski masks, but it's still very interesting. Geo snap that night. I always wonder if there was a Snapchat live stream, a group chat live stream, because it seemed like certain people in the grub truck were watching their devices, the others were just waiting for their food, and then we had the group that were yelling out Xana's name. So was something going on Snapchat. The picture on the left, the person with the pink ski mask, is allegedly Dylan, one of the surviving roommates. and we heard the other person was Quinn. I'm not sure of that. Allegedly. And on the person with the black mask is the one that was seen on GeoSnap. I hope law enforcement have investigated these masks and these people. Now this is interesting. Pause to read. The term GeoSnap is a Snapchat setting that allows your location to be untraceable. That's interesting. They could have been watching live streams to group chats in Snapchat, and their location was untraceable. Trigger warning. This is the door in the kitchen, inside the kitchen, and it seems like it has red liquid on it. I'm not sure if it's red liquid, but I find this to be strange. So I wonder if the attack happened once the person came inside the sliding door from the kitchen up to the living room and the bedrooms. That is quite possible. I find it interesting that Jack Showalter did not order any food. He did not eat at the grub truck, and he seemed to be upset when the girls left without telling him. We heard Maddie pointing out towards him and Joe Vito and saying, "F you, mister." What was actually going on that night? And why did Jack Showalter leave Idaho, Moscow, and allegedly he drove all the way to Boise, Idaho, to his family's cabin that is almost 6 hours away? I heard his interview with the police was done over the phone, and many other people's interview was done over the phone. Make that make sense. This is supposed to be awful quadruple murders. And the integration was done through the phone? Don't the police need to have checked him even if he was in Boise, Idaho? Why didn't they send the cops in Boise, Idaho to go and check if he had any scars and if his alibi matched? Did they check if he stopped at any gas stations? Because 5.5 hours is a long ride. It's a long drive to Boise, Idaho. If allegedly he was involved, he could have gone and hidden the knife at his parents' cabin or threw it on the way. What did he mean by saying, "Maddie, you know they're going to get you"? Allegedly. We've heard rumors that he was thrown out of the corner club due to sexual harassments. He's been thrown out of his fraternity for the same reason. This is all allegedly, but this part that he's been thrown out of the fraternity has been said by the college students themselves. This was something that happened right after the murders. We received a report of a man who reportedly chased 2 women on Blaine Street in Moscow around 5:15 on Monday. So this was the week after the quadruples. There was allegedly a man chasing 2 women. This picture was circulating a week after the murders. There was someone wearing a mask knocking on some of the students' door off campus. This is one of the pictures Saeed was watching on his phone in Banfield. If you look closer, although it's figures, you can see 2 or 3 people sitting down on the floor, and there's one person standing, pointing something towards them. You can see the person with the red jumper has long black hair. And then you can see, actually it looks like 4 people are sitting, because the person who seems to be, the figure that seems to be bright, next to the person in the black long hair, is bright because they have on white or grey or something, I would assume. This is just my speculations of what I see, but these are things that are clearly from Saeed's phone. I know they're blurry, but it's worth looking at. Zoom it, you will see that people look like they're gagged, actually. It's kind of strange that in the beginning of this case, we heard many rumors that the victims were gagged. Was it actually rumors or was it the facts? Allegedly. I don't want to leave one stone unturned to find out what happened to these 4 innocent victims. We need to go through blurry pictures from devices that these people are watching and figure this out. Another picture from Saeed's phone. Somebody has on a ski mask here. I think they have on a... See the ski mask, so they painted their face white. Police having no suspects is factually incorrect, Miller said. Police have had a number of suspects they looked at, but they have no suspects they're willing to name. You don't name them unless you have a purpose for that. That's unusual. So there were other suspects in the beginning. They had a number of suspects. To my